Ladies and gentlemen, I am Necabote, and this is my opinion, where I share my opinion and views on topics related to the gaming industry and anything else that might take my fancy news-wise. Today we're going to talk about Ubisoft. Last week they delayed Watch Dogs till spring of 2014. I know everybody's upset. They're delaying this fantastic, ambitious game. I'm going to tell you why that is a fantastic idea, and I wish everybody would do it. Now, in order to make my point, we're going to turn, first of all, to Creative Assembly and Total War Rome 2. Anybody play the game? I can tell you right now, it was not what was promised. They showcase fantastic AI. They showcase these massive organized battles. They promised scope, and they got the scope right. I mean, it's a massive game, and it's got this huge franchise. I'm not going to say the game was bad because it wasn't a bad game, but everything was wrong. There were bugs, glitches, crashes to the desktop, end of turn timers. I'd read a book in between turns on some occasions. The AI was terrible. The campaign AI would run from its last settlement because it was outnumbered. At what point does that make sense? In battles, there was no epicness to it. When you're playing in multiplayer, you can actually you would get the epic battle feeling, but when you're playing in single player against this vaunted AI, this decision making, this progressive decision making AI that they promised us, it just turned into a blob. That's all you get is one giant blob, and it wasn't any fun. And not to mention the fact that you would rarely actually end up going up against any elite units. You'd go up against Levy more often than not. I mean, there are reports of people being 250 turns in, still fighting Levy units. 250 turns in, and you're fighting Levy, and when you're sitting on elite, it doesn't work. And that's not counting the bugs and the glitches, the crashes to the desktop for people who can't play it. Why? Creative needed to wait a few more months. They needed to fix their game. But they didn't. They released it. It's on a PC. We can patch it. It's been a month and a half. They're finally patching the game to where it's playable, and it's somewhat delivering on what they promise. And I do say somewhat because I still think the AI is crappy. I think the campaign AI is a little bit better. It really is. But when it comes to battle AI, the single player game holds no interest in for me anymore. There's nothing to do. With multiplayer, it's fantastic, even though there's a little bit of balance issues there, but it doesn't matter. I mean, there's always going to be balance issues. The game is built in such a way that you're going to have units that are stronger than others. So that doesn't matter to me. But what does matter, I keep coming back to it, is an AI. They showcase an AI that beat the pants off a developer. And when you do any of these scripted battles, you do get a fantastic AI. But the moment you go into a campaign and you fight a battle, AI is terrible. I mean, there's no decision making. I don't understand where it's coming from. There's no progressive decision making AI here. Again, you have the bugs, the glitches, and they finally patched it out. But they needed to wait to release their game. Their game was not ready. They didn't have a choice. They had to release it. It had been advertised, hyped up, and set up and ready to go. They needed to release it in the time period they wanted, so they didn't have the competition. So they had people paying attention to just their game and everything else, and that's wrong because that hurts us as gamers. Because all of a sudden I paid $60 for a game that isn't what I paid $60 for. Now, granted, every time you buy a game, you're always getting it's rolling the dice unless you wait and read the reviews. When you buy a game on release day, you're rolling the dice, saying, "I hope this is what is promised. I hope this is as good as they make it out to be." Because it's easy to make something out to be great. Anybody been to a movie where they've shown the 3 scenes in the movie that were funny? Yeah, it happens. That's kind of what Creative did. They showed off an AI in a very scripted environment and said, "Hey, this is what everything is." No, it wasn't stable. It wasn't anything else. They didn't test it like they needed to. Instead, they patched it. And it took them a month and a half to patch it. We want to go move a little further back. Let's go to Blizzard and Diablo 3. Now, I know some people love Diablo 3. I like the game. I don't love the game, but I like the game because I love Diablo, and that's what I grew up on, right? When I come home from high school, play Diablo. I love Diablo. But Diablo 3 wasn't what they promised. Itemization was not complete when they released the game. The servers were not ready to receive the game. I mean, it was a week before the servers were finally stable. Maybe longer. It was a week before I could play on the servers. The real money auction house wasn't functional when it first came out, and it was the auction house in general, even with the in-game currency, was buggy as hell for a long time. Now, when I say itemization was not complete, the itemization was piss poor. I think. Part of it has to do with the way the game was designed, I realize, but since then they have kind of developed a further itemization. They have added various items into the game that have made it so the itemization is a little bit better. And what I mean by that is, and this is coming into my next part, is Inferno was not tweaked properly. It was insanely hard, and that was awesome. But it was so hard that you needed gear from Act 2 Inferno to beat Act 1 Inferno. That doesn't work. That can't work. Because then you're required to go to the auction house for people who have managed it can it's a cascade effect. But in this case, they finally fixed it. They fixed it so the itemization, the drop rates were in such a way that you could get what you wanted, what you needed, rather, to actually get through Inferno. But the game itself wasn't ready to be released. Now, Blizzard is one of those companies that said, hey, we're making a Diablo 3 game. It'll be out sometime in the fall. We lied. It's going to be the winter. We lied. It's going to be the spring. It's next year. They did that. And it hurt. But they did it. But then they set a release date, and the game, I don't think the game was quite ready. I mean, hell, they still haven't gotten the PvP out. We were showcased PvP, and it's been, what, a year and a half? Year and a half now. And there's no PvP. And they haven't actually talked about the PvP. They ignore it. They don't speak about it because I don't know if it's ever going to come. That was one of the big things that everybody was looking for, and it's not released. We got a new expansion coming out, so we can hope. But let's go back to Ubisoft. So Ubisoft has this game, this Watch Dogs. It's this huge, ambitious game, take place in Chicago, where you're basically be able to control the world around you by electronic means, right? Hacking, et cetera, et cetera. It's utterly ambitious, and I love the prospect of it. The premise. I said prospect. I meant premise. I love the premise of it. And they delayed it. Thank you. Thank you very much for not releasing a broken game. For not releasing something that wasn't ready. Ubisoft realized, hey, if we release this game, basically they're releasing it trying to hit the PS4 launch date. If we release this game when we say we are, we're not going to have a finished version. We're not going to have the version everybody wants. This thing's not complete. Yeah, it cost them money. Their stocks dropped. It might have cost them a couple fans. I know there are people who were just so hyped for this, and now they're not going to buy the game, which is ridiculous. I still think they're going to buy the game. I think the nerd rage will diminish. When you realize they did it for the best reason possible. They have set a precedent now that I wish every gaming company would follow. Don't release a game that isn't ready. If it's not ready, delay it. Don't set up a release date 6 months before it's ready. Don't set up a release date 6 months in advance unless you are 100% sure you can hit it. Ubisoft made a mistake. They set a release date. They realized a month beforehand, October 15th, they couldn't do it. So they said, well, shit, we're going to take a hit now, but we don't have a choice. Thank you for not just taking that hit. For not just releasing that game and destroying the name. Because if you release a game that isn't satisfying, especially when it's this ambitious, it does what Total War does, which I played it for 20 hours, and that was a hard 20 hours on occasion, and I have trouble touching it. I know it's been patched, but I have trouble touching it, and I don't want Watch Dogs to do this. I wish every gaming company would look at this and be like, hey, I know I set a release date. Why don't we just start setting release dates as tentatively in November of 2013? When it gets close to November now, I'm sorry, it's not quite ready. And you say that it's not quite ready. We're going to wait. I realize there are other financial means, or financial incentives, I should say, that dictate when games are released in terms of competition. Again, the PS4 is coming out. They want to hit that window. But sometimes that shouldn't, no, not even sometimes, that should never be enough to justify releasing a game. So Ubisoft, I applaud. Thank you for taking this, and I hope every other company will take what you did to heart and learn a lesson. You can delay a game. It won't kill you. And when this game is released, everything you lost will be regained. As long as it delivers what you promise. And you're making sure of that. And I thank you for it. So that's my opinion, folks. Thanks for watching. And please leave a comment down on the Reddit page. Let me know what you think. If you have any other topics you'd like me to go and comment on, let me know. I always read it. And I'll see you guys next time. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Necabote, and this is my opinion, where I share my opinion and views on topics related to the gaming industry and anything else that might take my fancy news-wise.